You are listening to the Navigating Adult ADHD podcast, where it's all about education, support, and coaching for adults with ADHD. I'm your host, Zena, a late diagnosed ADHDer, here to help you unpack the challenges, frustrations, and the positive side of living with ADHD. With my no BS approach, I'll help you to better understand your unique ADHD brain and how you can work with it to feel better, increase your self-confidence, improve your relationships, and ultimately achieve your goals. Hello, my friends. Welcome back to Navigating Adult ADHD. So happy to be with you all today. I feel like I haven't talked to you for ages because we've had 2 back-to-back guest episodes, but it's just me today. And we are going to be talking about emotions, which is such an important topic, and we are going to talk about why that is. But before we do that, I just want to remind you, if you are enjoying the podcast, if it is helping you, if you feel less alone, if you feel like, I sometimes hear from you guys, like, I feel like you're in my head or you're like observing my life. That's because I'm just like you. So if you feel like that and this podcast is helping you, I would really appreciate a 5-star review. And if you have the capacity and the ability to write a comment and talk about your experience of this podcast and what you get from it, that would be amazing. I know that some platforms don't allow that. They just ask you for a star rating. But the reason I keep mentioning this is because it helps us to reach more people with ADHD. It helps other people feel seen and heard and understood and less alone, and helps them to understand that there's not something wrong with them. And, there are things that we can do to support our ADHD, to manage it, and ultimately to thrive. So it means so much to me when you guys do that. So again, if you've got a friend you can send it to, go right ahead, forward it on over. All right, my friends, today is ADHD and emotions. And as I said, this is so important, and here's why. When we don't manage our emotions, ultimately they manage us, okay? When we don't know how to respond, we react, okay? When our emotions feel really intense and we're not sure how to respond to that, we just react to them. And this third one is so important. All our emotions drive our actions. I'm going to say it again. Our emotions drive all of our actions. Okay, we're going to talk about that more in a minute. So emotional dysregulation is one of the ADHD symptoms. Okay, it is part of the executive functions that probably I really see it as having the biggest impact on us. Okay, and the biggest effect on our lives, like a massive ripple effect throughout our life. And we're going to really dive into that today. It's something I coach on all of the time. It is really big. Now, it is widely known in psychology that our emotions drive all of our actions, right? We know when we feel motivated, we do the things. When we feel afraid, we generally hide or avoid and don't do the thing, okay? Maybe we procrastinate. Now, although it is widely known in psychology, it is not well communicated to all of us. There was no class in school that taught us about emotions, okay? The fact that our emotions drive all of our actions, how to feel our emotions, how to process them, what they mean, all of these things, where they come from. None of that. We learned none of that, right? Or at least I didn't. If you did, please tell me about your experience. That sounds like that would be amazing. I don't know about you guys, but I would much rather have learned about emotions and, how my mind works rather than trigonometry. I have never used that shit. All right, I digress. So emotions are everything. When we take action, it is because of how we feel. So for example, if you're watching Netflix and scrolling on Instagram, it's not because we're lazy. It's because of an emotion that we are feeling, or in many cases, an emotion we are trying to avoid feeling. I want you to hear that again, my friend. You are not lazy. You simply weren't taught how to regulate your emotions. I'm going to give you an example. So this past weekend, I was really triggered by a Facebook post from a doctor who I follow. And I really loved this doctor's work, and I thought she was doing some great stuff in the world. However, she shared an ADHD meme about Big Pharma, so the pharmaceutical companies, and how they were profiting so much, like billions of dollars, from ADHD medication sales. And she wrote about how if you're experiencing any of these symptoms, and she listed off like 5 things, and she said, congratulations, you're human. Now, my friends, that shit sent me into rage. Like my blood was boiling, I was pissed, I was angry, like my face was on fire, like the keyboard warrior in me was like, what the? Like, I wanted to hit back. Whoa. I was really fired up. To make it worse, I was in bed. This was on a Saturday night, and I was in bed and I was just scrolling on my phone, and it wasn't long before I planned to put my phone down and like wind down to go to sleep. So of course, what happens is I get really fired up. Okay. Now, prior to learning how to regulate my emotions, I would have obsessed over this. I literally would have become the keyboard warrior and taken my rage to the comment section. I would have stayed up all night. I wouldn't have been able to sleep because I would have been so angry and like ruminating on it and running over and over and over it in my head. I would have messaged all of my friends. I probably would have, shared it on Facebook and been like, oh my God. And I would have really held on to it for a long time. And I also want you to know that that's a completely normal response and a normal reaction for so many of us ADHDers. Because this is a big part of having emotional dysregulation. When we don't know how to soothe and regulate our emotions, we react. Or we might try to hide it. We might try to stuff all of those emotions deep down inside, especially if we're in a public setting. We may kind of try and shove them all in and just look at what everyone else is doing and kind of copy their reaction, but it's much like holding a beach ball underwater. It requires effort and struggle, and eventually it comes back up with a vengeance. Okay? So, as adults with ADHD, we feel our emotions more intensely. We experience them more intensely than our neurotypical friends. So if you've ever been called sensitive, that makes sense because we experience things more deeply than others. We also have a lower frustration tolerance. I can 100% agree with that. We have a hot temper. We can be impatient and be very quick to get excited. Now, many of us also go very quickly into a state of fight or flight, which we're going to elaborate on in a minute. Okay? As ADHDers, we often experience RSD. That is rejection, sensitivity, dysphoria. So what that means is we can be terrified of, potentially being rejected or criticized or failing, and we may avoid things or hold ourselves back, or when those things do happen, or we, think that a circumstance has created that, even though, what I'm trying to get at here is like sometimes we perceive a situation as we've been criticized or rejected, but we don't actually have that as factual information. That's just how we're reading it. Like I know this from my own life a lot. And I don't want to get into that too much, but like in that example, when we feel like we're being criticized or rejected, that can be so deeply painful for us. And as I said, it can really lead us to avoid doing things. So for me, for example, that was a large part of why I stayed single for well over 10 years. I was literally terrified of dating, but it wasn't the dating, it was the being rejected or criticized. That was the part I was terrified of. And this is so common for us. Not just with dating, but also when it comes to friendships, making friends, meeting new people, with job opportunities, we sometimes avoid putting ourselves out there, or we talk ourselves out of it like I did, or we just justify it to ourselves because of this RSD, this fear of being rejected or criticized or failing. Another one for us ADHD is many of us as adults with ADHD, like we have learned to mask our emotions. And what that means is basically to hide them. We can sort of stuff them deep down inside, which often leads to addictive or unhealthy behaviors as a way to numb ourselves or to try and feel better. Okay, just the other day I was speaking to a new client, and she shared with me how she kind of learned in social settings to look to other people for how to appropriately react in those environments, because she learned from a young age that the way she tended to react and respond to things was not, I put air quotes, appropriate, because other people weren't doing that. And that makes so much sense, okay? We have been taught all of our lives that our feelings are wrong or bad or too intense or just too much for the people around us. Like, we have heard things like, calm down, you're overreacting, don't be sad, stop crying, it's not that bad, cheer up, you're okay. And that gives us this real, internal conflict between what we're experiencing and what we, air quotes, should be experiencing based on what other people are saying or doing. It's just such a mixed message. And we, of course, have kind of learned to hide our feelings or try and, be different than we are, because we've been taught that our feelings are just wrong or bad or too much for other people. I remember my mum saying things like, sticks and stones will break your bones, but words will never hurt you. I think that's what it was. And the whole water off a duck's back, right? But I could never let shit go. I swear that words were worse. Like, I wish sometimes that somebody at school had just punched me in the face instead of saying the words that they did. And I know that's an extreme example, but that was how I genuinely felt, because then I could have responded in a similar manner and I felt like I would have been able to get it out. I could never let go of things. I always felt like it just seemed so much easier for my mum, who was saying that, or for anyone else around me, just to let things go. And now, knowing that my mum, for example, is neurotypical, and most of those people around me were, and that they are able to self-regulate, whereas that was not something I developed and learned, it makes so much sense, okay? All of this to say, my friends, you are not alone if you struggle with emotional regulation. If this is you're like, yep, ticking away, there is nothing wrong with you. Emotional regulation is a skill that you can develop with the right tools and support. Now, when we talk about emotions, there is one critical component that I really want to highlight. And that is around the fight or flight that I mentioned before, okay? Heightened emotions hijack our brain's resources. So that makes it even harder for us to focus, make decisions, pay attention, prioritize, get things done, all of that, okay? What this means is when we go into fight or flight, okay, our brain and our body deploy all resources to one direction, which is stay alive. So all of our bodies and our brain's resources are redeployed in this one direction, which is stay alive, because our internal alarm system is saying, we're in danger, 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 we must fight to stay alive. Like when we're in fight or flight, which so many ADHDers end up, as adults with ADHD, we end up living in that state for so long, especially when we're undiagnosed for a large, portion of our lives. So when we're in that state, we have, what that means is we've got less of our precious resources, like our dopamine and our norepinephrine that we need to power our executive functions. We have those redeployed in the direction of staying alive. Okay, so what that means is our ADHD symptoms can get a lot worse for us when we're in those heightened emotional states, And it makes sense, right? Because our brain's resources have been redeployed to staying alive. Okay? Heightened emotions can really make our symptoms worse. So I want you to think about this for a moment. How do you react to your emotions? Like, how do you respond when you get frustrated or angry or fired up? So for me, this used to look like arguing, raising my voice, like I said, maybe becoming that keyboard warrior, ranting on Facebook, like talking about it over and over and over again, ruminating on it, like in my brain, constantly thinking about it. And sometimes it would look like, if it was with somebody else, like giving them the silent treatment. So, of course, that can, cause issues in our relationships. And it's no doubt, I have been reflecting on this recently, it is no doubt a large part of why some of my friendships ended, because of my inability to regulate my emotions and, the way that I would often react and respond in these sorts of situations. Now, when you think about, how we respond or how you react when you do get frustrated, angry, and fired up, I don't know about you, but for me, I would always regret my actions later. Like I would have thought, God, I wish I hadn't said that, or I hadn't done that. I wish I could take that back. And it would always end with me beating myself up and just feeling even worse. It was like this vicious cycle. And also, how do you act? What do you do when you're feeling ashamed or anxious or scared? Like for me, those were the times where I would like binge watch on Netflix, I would drink a lot of alcohol, and I would eat anything sweet in the house. And I was really resisting and trying to avoid feeling the way I was feeling. I was trying to really hide from it, like numb the pain or distract myself with some form of dopamine. And so many of the times that I had planned to do something like, go for a run after work or stop at the gym or, something like this, on the way home, I would just not do that. I was feeling anxious or overwhelmed. So instead, I'd just drive home and then I would, binge the Netflix and drink some alcohol and, eat all the sweet stuff. And resisting and avoiding our emotions is a huge driver for procrastination. The problem with resisting and avoiding or reacting to our emotions is that they stay with us so much longer. Now, again, my friends, you are not alone if you experience this, and there is nothing wrong with you, okay? This is a symptom of ADHD. This is so common for us. And emotional regulation is a skill we can learn. Like, that's such good news. And I will tell you, it is a skill that did help me to overcome that fear of dating. And I was able to find somebody to share my life with. It also helped me to overcome my fear of speaking in public and speaking on stages in front of hundreds of people and leaving my comfort zone over and over again. Do I still get scared? Yes. But I have the emotional regulation tools to be able to support myself through that process and still take action. It's also a skill that has helped me to not become the keyboard warrior and, say things that I might later regret, on Facebook. For example, with that doctor's post the other day, I was able to regulate myself and get to a place where I could respond because I wanted to add a comment because I felt very, it felt like so out of alignment with my values that I was like, I'm definitely going to say something, but I want to do it from a good place, something that I feel really good about and will be able to then go to sleep and not think about it constantly. And I was able to get to that place by regulating my emotions. Okay. Now, if this is something that you struggle with, I highly encourage you to work with a professional and get some support. Okay. You can work with a therapist or a coach, preferably somebody who specializes in ADHD. Okay. And of course, you can definitely come and work with me. We can do this work together. Now, I will say that if you are looking for somebody to work with to get some support, especially in the area of emotional regulation, whether that be a therapist, a coach, or another professional, find someone that you feel safe and comfortable with. Someone who has a really good knowledge and understanding of ADHD and someone who can teach you tools for regulating your emotions and managing your ADHD. Okay? And if you're not sure, ask them. Like most of us, I know I offer, like a free call ahead of time, and most professionals do, so that you can establish, are we a good fit? And if they don't, then you can like look at reviews, or you can have a really good look at their profile and have a read through. But find somebody that feels like a really good fit for you. Okay? So when it comes to emotional regulation, I teach my clients a 5-step process. And this is a process that you can walk yourself through to really take care of yourself and your needs whilst you process the emotions and what is going on. Now, this process is based on a model called RAIN, as in RAIN, like when it rains. And this is one that many psychologists and therapists often use. Okay, so it's based in a lot of research. Now, I have added one additional step to this process based on the ADHD experience and the need to calm our heightened emotions and regain control of our resources. So the process that I have adapted and developed for myself and for my clients is now called RAISIN, RASIN. Okay, the raisin method. Now, if you live in New Zealand, and I don't know if this happens overseas as well, but we have, I think they're called sun-made raisins, like the little red packet of raisins that you can get. And I think it's just so appropriate because often when I think about some of those more difficult emotions that I know I used to really avoid and still like don't enjoy having, right? Things like shame especially, or, anger. I think about like, the shriveled up raisin feels quite appropriate to me. It needs a bit of like water to be able to become the grape again. That's my mind picture anyway, okay? So to go through the 5 steps, the first one is recognize. This is where we name the emotion and acknowledge what's happening. Then we have allow. So this is the part where we stop fighting and resisting the emotion. Then we have soothe. Okay, so soothing our brain and our body. Investigate, finding out why we are feeling this way. And then nurturing. Okay, so this process is designed to process what you are feeling, to soothe yourself, and to understand what you're feeling and why. Now, when appropriate, we can then change how we are feeling. That is also part of this model. And I say when appropriate because, when we feel a negative emotion, we so often just want to feel good again, right? But it doesn't just work like that. We can't just magically click your fingers and do that. However, and by doing that, we miss a lot of the human experience, which I'm going to get to in a minute. But at the same time, we can change how we feel, and we can do that quite quickly using this process. But first of all, we want to, allow ourselves to have our feeling, go through this process, soothe ourselves, understand the feeling, why we have it. Then we can look at changing it. Okay? Now, emotional regulation, it is a skill, and it's one we can learn and develop. And this skill will help you to take action. Okay, remember, our emotions drive all of our actions. It will improve relationships. It makes RSD way less painful, right? And I can 100% attest to that from my own experience. It improves our communication with others and also our understanding of other people and ourselves. And emotional regulation is such an important skill when it comes to achieving our goals. Like at the heart of this, when we have the ability to regulate our emotions, it helps us to be more in control of ourselves instead of having our emotions constantly running the show. Okay? Now, I'll be honest with you, it does require time and attention. So sometimes this practice will take me 5 minutes, sometimes it'll take me more like 15 or 20. But how much time have we lost in our lives by reacting to our emotions or avoiding them? Or like me, sitting on the couch, binging Netflix, drinking the wine, and, eating all the sugar in the house. I know I've lost a lot of time. How much time do we lose to procrastination? To ruminating or talking about something over and over and over again and like obsessing over it? Like, how much time do we lose to that? My friends, this is a topic when we talk about emotional regulation. Like I really have been sitting on this one for a while because this is such a big topic. And I was thinking I could do so many episodes on this. I could do an episode on every single step of the emotional regulation process that I use and I teach people. Like we could have one episode for each one. And we may in the future, okay? Don't get me wrong, like we're going to continue talking about this because this is such a big thing for us as ADHDers. Now, I have already pre-decided that next week's episode is going to be a follow-on from this and emotions because most of us think that we should feel good all of the time and that happiness is the goal, that ultimately we should just be happy most of the time. And I hate to break it to you, but this is not true. Okay, stay with me. Promise. It's actually going to help you feel a lot better this next episode. Okay. Like the idea, and society has taught us this, that we should, be happy and we should feel good most of the time. Like that idea is really setting us up to fail and it's causing us a shitload of pain. And so we're going to explore that in next week's episode. And I promise, even though this doesn't sound like good news, you're going to feel better. I promise, okay? All right, my friends, if this has been helpful, again, please remember to leave us a 5-star review, send it to a friend. That would be amazing. Huge love to you guys. I look forward to speaking to you again next week. Take care. If you are loving what you're learning here on the podcast, but you still feel like your ADHD is holding you back, I can help. Using evidence-based coaching tools and my own experiences, I'll help you to manage your emotions and feel better, to increase your productivity, grow your self-confidence, and create the life that you were meant for. Visit zenajones.com/thrive. and schedule an ADHD support session to get started.